We are looking at Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. We're looking at Maulana Maududi's Islamic constitutionalism critically. And we think that Maulana Maududi, through his constitutionalism, legitimizes liberal theories and practices on Islamic grounds. We want to develop a critique of this. Now, this liberal endorsements of liberal democratic constitutionalism actually, conceptually, is at loggerhead with Maulana Maududi's system as a whole. Maulana Maududi is a seminal figure in contemporary Islamic thought. His critically important contributions are, so these are his positive contributions, in our opinion. His development of Shah Waliullah's conception of Islam as a complete closed system and as only universal civilization. It is on this basis that Maulana Maududi makes the distinction between Islam and Jahiliyyah. Let's look at these key points, 1, 2, and 3. So these are the key elements of Maulana Maududi's thought, which are positive and with which we agree. Now, Shah Waliullah is a great mujaddid and imam of Muslims of subcontinent, which includes India and Pakistan and part of Afghanistan and Bangladesh and all those areas. And basically all major Muslim schools one way or another are founded by Shah Waliullah's students, or at least those people who had have a chain, especially in Hadith, through Shah Waliullah and his students. And Imam Maulana Maududi is one of the followers of Imam Shah Waliullah. And he follows Imam Waliullah in these three respects, in the sense that he forcefully argues Islam is a complete system. In Urdu, Islam Islamic Mukammal Nizam-e Hayat. And this might seem truism today, but with the rise of modernism and with the rise of imperialism and with the defeat of Muslim scholars in 1857, after which the British committed one of the unique genocide of Muslim scholars in India, where, according to some account, over 60,000 Muslim scholars were executed, and many were banished to in uninhabited islands, and many, had to flee for their life. So after that, the strategy of ulama was to withdraw. And protect Islam as much as they could in masjid. And this withdrawal was in part with withdrawal from politics. And many of when you do certain things and you don't do certain other things which are expected of you, then you try to explain them as well. And often you try to explain them as contingent strategies, but it is easy to slip from contingency to principled opinion. And one of the outcome of this was many Muslim scholars either didn't pay attention to the aspect of Islam which calls for describe Islam as a complete system, because a lot of it was theoretical, because the system was not under Muslim influence. So they didn't want to talk about things which were just theoretical. They didn't want to obviously agitate the British, who were always on lookout against any possible, anti-systematic struggles from Muslims. And one of the negative outcome of it was that some Orthodox big scholars and their schools developed, which actually presented Islam as a system or a way of life which can, cohabit with the British rule and all those things. And they focus on individual purification of the people and teaching them Islamic rules and implementing Islam in family life and all that. So the classical defense strategy. But in order to, defend their strategy, some of them actually argued that Islam wasn't a system, and politics was something which wasn't necessary part of Islam. Like, for example, Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi, who was one of the students of Maulana Mahmudul Hasan Deobandi, but actually opposed the jihadi movement of Maulana Mahmudul Hasan, because he thought that this was, against the interests of Islam and all that. Anyway, in that, and obviously with the British rule, the secularism was rise. Secularism was on rise. Obviously, among Muslim as well as Hindus, and some of the Orthodox Muslim scholars were impressed with that secularism as well, at least at the practical level, because they thought, that was the best way to defend Islam in India. And whatever its merits were from a practical point of view, from a theoretical point of view, there was concessions were made which were not Islamic, or at least against the spirit of Islam. So against those, one of the great mujaddids of our time was Maulana Maududi. He reasserted forcefully Shah Waliullah's notion that Islam is a complete system. Which he describes in detail in Hujjatullah al-Baligha and in his other books, in Fuyuzul Haramain, and in At-Tafhimat al-Ilahiyya, and in Izalatul Khafa and Khilafat al-Khulafa, and all those other works. Islam is a complete system. Complete system meaning a complete system of a life which encompasses the whole life. Nothing is outside its orbit. And this notion of system obviously goes against the very notion of modern state, because that's how modern state defines itself as well, whether it's a liberal state or non-liberal state. It is the state which in modern times replaces Islam as a complete system, or Christianity as a complete system. Even though Christianity had the problem because it wasn't actually a complete system. So it had always had to compromise with secularism anyway. But obviously what Shah Waliullah, when we are saying is Shah Waliullah's conception of Islam as a complete system, we are referring to a Muslim tradition which formulates this notion or this conception in the context of Muslim society and Muslim traditions and Muslim state in India. But otherwise it's a system, it's a notion or conception which follows from the Quran. Yeah? Inna Deena Inda Allahi Islam, and our deen is a system, a way of life, or both a life world and a system, if you want to use a modern terminology. So Maulana Maududi's great contribution was to reassert this. And today, obviously, it's a commonplace. Everybody uses this, at least in Indo-Pakistan and Afghanistan and Bangladesh, without obviously giving Maulana Maududi his due credit. Even those who oppose Maulana Maududi ideologically and Islamically use his thought, without hesitation today. So that was one of his great contribution, and and very, very important contribution in the context of the rise of the modern state, especially. Now, Maulana Maududi and Shah Waliullah didn't just say that Islam is a complete system, but they also said that Islam is a closed system. Because a system cannot be complete in a way if it is not a closed system. Because, for example, Hindus can claim that their system of life is a complete system, but they can't claim that it is a closed system. That's why Hinduism today has no resemblance with probably, how Hinduism existed thousands of years or even 200-300 years ago. That's why it's important with the complete system, the second element, that it is a closed system. And when we say closed system, what we mean is something like what system theory, our system theory defined closed system. A closed system, and I'm just quoting here definition, a standard definition within system theory. A closed system is a system which doesn't allow input of any matter. So important here is input of any matter, resources, ideas, or information from its surrounding. And isn't subject to any force whose source is external to that system. This is another way of saying that a closed system is a system which is self-sufficient. It rejects the legitimacy of all other systems. Shawalillah, fakku kulla nizam is derived, his slogan is derived from this thought. And what is outside it is non-Islamic or Jahiliyyah. That's another concept of Maulana Maududi, Jahiliyyah, which is also developed by Sayyid Qutb. Jahiliyyah doesn't necessarily mean it's kufr, but Jahiliyyah does mean that an order which is not according to the spirit and the internal requirement of the Islamic system. Obviously, this is not to deny that Islam is able to absorb things from outside a system, but that is theorized on the basis that because every society has good tradition which are descended from the pre-Jahili Islamic tradition in that society. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets to every society, that's why there are always good things in there. Makarim al-akhlaq. So Islam, on that basis, it can, that's how Islam makes itself natural in different environments, because it can relate to pre-Jahili Islamic traditions in every society, even the most corrupt society. But that doesn't deny that it's a closed system, because what it takes is its own elements and on its own ground and on its own conditions, and on the basis of its own rules and regulation and all those. So these are three elements. These are some of the key elements of Mullah Maududi's thought, to emphasize that Islam is a complete system, and this completeness is further asserted through that it is a closed system, that is, it is a self-sufficient system. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم بالإسلام دينا. That's what closed system means. And the third, it is the only civilization, because outside Islam it's only Jahiliyyah. And within Jahiliyyah, if there are good tradition, that's because they are the distortion of Islam present in that Jahiliyyah before it overtook and corrupted it. So in pre-Islamic Arab Jahili tradition, although Islam rejects the Jahili, it can still find good traditions, because it recognizes that those traditions are descended from the true followers of Ismail al-Islam. That's why in every society, the task for Muslim social engineering is to see the positive traditions which are still existent in that society, which are possibly descendant from the traditions of the Prophet, and relate Islamic way of life to those traditions to make Islam natural in the society. But that doesn't contradict the fact that Islam is a complete system and is a closed system, and it's the only civilization. It doesn't recognize any other civilization, because if you worship if you don't worship God and worship someone else, either false god or your own nafs, then the society and civilization based on that false worship is not a civilization, it really. In that sense, Islam is the only true civilization in Medina, in the Lail Islam. So these are three important elements of Mullah Maududi's thought, which he took from Imam Waliullah, and then developed these thoughts in his own writings, according to the language of his day. Okay, I think we'll stop here, and we'll continue this before we go on to discuss Mullah Maududi's Islamic constitutionalism.